My wife invited her ex to Thanksgiving, moved me to a folding chair at the wall, and told me to leave my own table. I drove straight to my buddy's and spent 75 minutes canceling all 47 accounts she had access to. Alright Reddit, get comfortable, grab something to eat, because this story is going to take a while and it gets heavy. My name's Kevin, I'm 30 years old. I married a woman named Ada 3 years ago, mostly because I'm the kind of guy who can't resist a hard luck story and a pretty face, a real sucker for both, and I knew it even then. When we first crossed paths at a company mixer, she had this whole fragile, lost bird energy about her. Her ex-husband Mike had packed up and disappeared on her and their daughter Ruby when the girl was just 9 years old, leaving Ada scrambling to keep the lights on. She was a receptionist at a dental clinic, barely making ends meet. And there I was, electrical engineer, 6-figure salary, convinced I could swoop in and fix everything. Classic savior complex. I see it clearly now. There's a scar running down the left side of my face from an accident at a warehouse when I was 22. Forklift hit a metal shelf, the shelf hit me, 70 stitches. It's not something you miss. Women either stare too long or bend over backwards pretending it's not there. Some handle it gracefully. Others don't. Dating after that accident became a whole different game. You figure out fast who's genuinely interested and who's just killing time until they can find a polite exit. Ada was nothing like that. When we first met, she glanced at the scar once, just once, and then looked me straight in the eyes and kept talking. Completely normal about it. No awkwardness, no performance. After years of first dates that fizzled out before they got anywhere real, that hit differently. She was standing by the snack table looking a little lost when I spotted her. I made some stupid joke about how terrible the food was, and she actually laughed. We ended up talking for a solid hour about nothing in particular. She was charming in a way that felt effortless, not calculated. After years of dating women who led with their Instagram follower count, that felt refreshingly real. She brought up Ruby on our third date. Didn't dance around it, single mom, flaky ex-husband, doing her best, here's the situation. I respected that kind of honesty. Our first 6 months together were genuinely good. Really good. She'd have lunch packed for me before morning shifts. We'd curl up on her couch watching movies after Ruby went to bed. Random texts throughout the day, nothing big, just the small stuff that makes a relationship feel alive. It worked. I got introduced to Ruby about a month in, she was 12, just about to turn 13. Quiet kid, well-mannered, the type who said please and thank you without anyone prompting her. We clicked over video games pretty quickly. She seemed genuinely glad to have a steady, reliable presence in her life. After 8 months of dating, I proposed. Looking back now, all the warning signs were there. I just made excuses for every single one. She'd get irritated whenever I spent time with Kyle, my buddy from work. She'd take digs at my hobbies with sly little comments. She'd guilt me every time I didn't instantly drop everything to handle whatever emergency she'd cooked up that day, always urgent, always requiring my time and my wallet. But when she wanted to be, she was charming. She'd show up at my apartment with dinner after a brutal shift. She'd remember the little details from things I'd mentioned earlier in the week. Those moments kept throwing me off the scent. I proposed at a restaurant she'd been hinting about for months. Nothing flashy, quiet booth, ring I'd saved up for. She cried when I asked. Said yes before I could even finish the sentence. Ruby seemed thrilled when Ada broke the news the next morning. The wedding was small. 60 guests, local venue. I covered every dollar of it because Ada had no savings, $8,000 total. Her mother gave a speech about how Ada had finally landed herself a dependable man. Mike didn't show. Ruby served as junior bridesmaid and looked genuinely happy to be there. Once we were married, I paid off Ada's credit card debt, $7,200 she'd racked up surviving as a single mom. I moved them both into my house, a 3-bedroom I'd bought 2 years before the wedding in a good school district. Got Ruby enrolled in a private school with smaller class sizes and actual resources. I started a college fund for her, putting away $300 every month. I showed up for every school function and parent-teacher night, played the stepfather role at every soccer game even though Ruby wasn't exactly an athlete. I helped with homework, taught her to drive when she hit 16, and did every single dad thing that nobody else was doing. 6 months after the wedding, Ada quit her receptionist job. Said she wanted to put more energy into being a wife and mother. That position had paid $32,000 a year with benefits. Losing it stung financially, but I told myself if it made the household run better, it was worth it. That's around the time things started shifting. She got comfortable in a way that started feeling like she'd stopped caring. The lunches stopped. The random texts dried up. She was on her phone constantly instead of actually talking to me. She started picking at the house, Wanted to redecorate everything. I wrote a check for $4,000 worth of new living room furniture. She picked every piece herself, had it all delivered, and then complained that the couch didn't look like what she'd pictured. Ruby made her own transformation from a decent kid into a full-on entitled teenager, seemingly overnight. For her 16th birthday, I bought her a used Honda Civic, reliable, low mileage, perfect first car. She complained it wasn't an Accord. Said her friends had better cars. The phone upgrade wasn't the newest model. The clothes weren't the right labels. Her monthly allowance wasn't enough. She started treating me like household staff instead of the guy paying for her entire life. Ada didn't just let it slide, she encouraged it. I'd hear her on the phone with her mother and her sister Caroline, talking about how I was useful but dull. How Mike had been exciting even if he couldn't be counted on. How she'd married me for stability. I know I'm not the thrilling type. I don't do surprise weekend getaways or grand romantic gestures. I'm the guy who pays the bills when they're due and fixes things before they break. But I showed up without fail, treated them both with respect, and never once made them feel like they owed me gratitude for any of it. Turns out that wasn't worth much to them. Maybe I should have predicted this. A guy with a face like mine doesn't have a long line of options. I understood that going in. I figured loyalty and consistency would count for more than excitement. I was wrong. I was just the practical guy they needed, not the man either of them actually wanted. Kyle clocked the change before I was ready to admit it to myself. We'd grab lunch together most days at the work site, and he'd listen to me vent about whatever the latest drama at home was. "Man, she's got you wrapped," he said one afternoon, about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving. "She's running you like you're on a leash. It's not that bad. You wrote a check for her mom's dental work last month." Her mom, man. He wasn't wrong. I'd handed over $3,200 for Ada's mother's root canal because Ada cried about it. Not a single thank you from either of them. And what about this cruise Ada's been pushing? The $5,000 one? She just wants us to have a nice experience. When's the last time she gave you something nice that didn't start with her spending your money? I laughed it off. Told him he was being too cynical. I really wish I hadn't. About 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Ada started acting off. Sneaking calls in the other room, tilting her phone away from me when I walked by, grinning at text messages and wiping them as soon as she'd read them. She said she was working on something special for the holiday. I figured she was actually putting some effort into the marriage for once, maybe planning a surprise. Completely wrong on both counts. I tried asking what was going on. She'd just smile and say, "You'll find out on Thanksgiving." But the way she said it didn't sound like excitement. Something about her voice was different. The night before Thanksgiving, Ruby hit me up for $200 for Black Friday shopping. I reminded her she had her $300 monthly allowance and said no. She completely lost it. Full breakdown in the kitchen, screaming about how I was destroying her life, how all her friends got to shop, how she was stuck home because I was too cheap. Then she threw the real punch. Screamed that I wasn't her real father. That she couldn't wait to turn 18 and get out. That Mike would have handed her the cash without blinking. The whole production. And Ada stood in the doorway the entire time, watching, not saying a single word to back me up. When Ruby finally stormed off, I turned to Ada and asked if she was going to say anything. She told me Ruby was just being a typical teenager and I was taking it too personally. I told her Ruby had just said I wasn't her real father. Ada shrugged and said that was technically accurate. That right there should have been all I needed to know about what was coming. Kyle called that evening to wish me a happy Thanksgiving. I was out in the garage, sitting in the dark, trying to figure out when everything had gone so sideways. He could hear it in my voice and offered to swing by the next day for some moral support. I told him it was a family thing and I'd get through it. He cracked some joke about how Thanksgiving at my wife's family's table might actually qualify as a hostage situation. I laughed, but it didn't sound convincing even to me. Kyle's gut was almost never wrong. I really should have taken him up on that offer. Thanksgiving morning, I got the dining room ready. Ada had insisted on hosting this year, which was unusual since she normally pushed for us to go to her mother's place. I set the table, arranged the chairs, made sure everything was perfect for what she kept calling her special dinner. Then Mike walked in like he lived there. Ada had let him in through the garage, all warm smiles and casual greetings, like they were old friends catching up rather than a deadbeat ex-husband who hadn't laid eyes on his daughter in 7 years. He looked at me and flashed this smug grin, thanked me for taking care of his girls. His girls, as if he'd earned any right to that. Before I could get a word out, Ada guided him toward the dining room. I followed, carrying the serving dishes, trying to piece together what was actually happening. Her mother and Caroline were already seated. Caroline caught my eye from across the table and gave a small, almost desperate shake of her head, like she was trying to warn me. That's when I saw where Mike was heading. Straight to the head of the table. My seat. Ada. What is going on? She turned around with that well-rehearsed innocent look. I invited Mike to join us. Ruby needs her real father here. Her real father? The man who vanished for 7 years? Don't turn this into a scene. Mike settled into my chair like he owned the room. Ada grabbed my arm and physically shoved me toward a folding chair pushed up against the wall, not even at the table. Sit there. This is family time. I looked at Ruby. Waited for her to say something, to stand up for the man who'd actually been her father for the past 3 years. She wouldn't even look at me. I said her name, one last time, gave her one final chance. Her head came up, and her expression was pure contempt. If you've got a problem with the seating, then leave. Nobody's keeping you here. Her grandmother actually clapped. Mike leaned back in my chair with a smirk and said something about this being a family dinner and that I should understand that. Ada stood there with her arms crossed, waiting. Probably expected me to either fold and take that wall chair or blow up and make a scene. The whole thing was a setup from the beginning, a coordinated ambush to show me exactly where I stood in that house. Dead last. Below everyone. Caroline was watching me very carefully now. She looked somewhere between sorry for me and furious at her own family. She was the only one in that room who seemed to understand what was actually happening. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds. Ada was waiting for me to crack. Ruby was practically daring me to push back. Mike was absolutely savoring his moment. I grabbed my jacket and my keys without a word. Ada's voice jumped with what sounded like sudden panic, asked where I was going. I didn't answer. I walked out the front door, got in my truck, and drove. They wanted me gone. Message received. But they had no idea what came next. I drove straight to Kyle's apartment. He opened the door in sweatpants, clearly not expecting company at 4 in the afternoon on a holiday. I gave him the quick version. His expression shifted from surprise to stone cold in about 2 seconds flat. In your house? The one you own and pay for? In my house, at my table, with her whole family watching. He stepped aside. Get in here. We've got things to do. I need to cut her off from everything. Tonight. Then let's make it count. That's exactly why Kyle was my best friend. We sat down at his kitchen table and started building a complete picture of my financial life. Every account, every bill, every service, every subscription, all of it. An hour and 15 minutes to compile the full list. It was eye-opening to see just how deep in she was. Joint checking, credit cards, car insurance, cell phone plan, streaming services, cloud storage, house cleaning, gym membership, Ruby's phone and app subscriptions, a meal kit service Ada had ordered once, hated, and then refused to cancel out of spite. 47 items. 47 ways she'd gotten used to living off my money. Then we went to work. First thing, the joint checking account. $34,000 sitting there from my bonuses, my paycheck, my savings. Ada had added exactly $0 to that account since quitting her job. Kyle helped me navigate to a different bank's website and open a new individual account in my name only. He had me use his address for the mailing address so no paperwork could be intercepted. 7 minutes later, $34,000 was in an account only I could touch. Next on the list, credit cards. I had 2 cards in my name with Ada listed as an authorized user. One with a $20,000 limit, one with another $20,000 limit. Between them she'd run up about $8,000. I called both companies, told them I was going through a divorce, and asked to remove the authorized user and cancel the cards entirely. No resistance, no pushback. Done within 10 minutes. Replacements would be mailed to Kyle's address in 5 business days. Kyle pointed out that she'd probably head out Black Friday shopping tomorrow assuming the card still worked. That was going to be a memorable moment at the checkout. I could picture it clearly, cart full of stuff she didn't need, card handed over with total confidence, cashier's face when it declined. Worth everything. Car insurance next. The Camry she drove was titled in my name, registered in my name, insured under my policy. She was just listed as a driver. I called the insurer, explained I was separating from my spouse, and asked to remove her as an authorized driver effective immediately. Handled without much fuss. The vehicle itself would stay insured under my name until the courts worked out the property split. Kyle asked about the house. She was still there. I told him I'd file for temporary orders first thing in the morning. Before that, I needed a lawyer. He told me his sister Janet handled family law and didn't play games, pricey, but the sharpest around. I said to get me in front of her tomorrow if at all possible. He texted her right then, gave her the short version, and asked whether what we'd already done was legally solid. Her reply came back about a minute later. Kyle read it and looked up at me. She says pulling from the joint account and canceling the credit cards was smart. Removing Ada as a driver, totally fine. Canceling services that are in your name, completely within your rights. Just don't go near anything that could be called marital property or interpreted as sabotage. Don't sell anything, don't destroy anything, don't change the door locks yet. Save all that for after a court order. Good to know I'd kept myself on the right side of the line. Cell phones, a family plan with 3 lines costing me $220 every month. With Janet's clearance, I suspended Ada's and Ruby's lines with termination scheduled for 6 o'clock the next morning. We kept working through the list methodically. Cancelled Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, HBO Max, Spotify Premium, Ruby's gaming subscriptions. Every cancellation felt like cutting another rope that had been weighing me down. Kyle asked about the home security setup. I had a doorbell camera, motion sensors, and smart locks, a full system I'd installed myself the previous year. I changed the master password to something she'd never crack in a million years and revoked her access to the app entirely. She was now completely locked out, couldn't see who was at the door, couldn't check camera feeds, couldn't unlock anything remotely. Changed the Wi-Fi password too while we were at it. Created a new network name and new password. Her devices would hit a dead wall when they tried to connect in the morning. She'd wake up with no internet and no way to restore it without calling the provider. My phone started ringing. Ada. I turned the screen face down without looking. Cancelled her downtown gym membership. Cancelled the house cleaning service, $90 per visit, twice a month. Got rid of the subscription boxes she never opened. Locked down online shopping accounts. Removed her from my Amazon Prime. Cancelled the car wash membership she used more than I did. Every single item on the list. By the time we were done, I had surgically removed every piece of financial access she had, every convenience, every service, every small luxury she'd quietly treated as permanent over the past 3 years. Kyle leaned back and looked at the spreadsheet. 47 items. You're saving about $3,200 a month. I hadn't actually stopped to add it all up before. $3,200 a month, nearly $40,000 a year, in comforts and conveniences for 2 people who had just made it crystal clear they didn't see me as family. My phone was blowing up now. Calls from multiple numbers stacking up. I'd switched it to Do Not Disturb, but I could see the screen lighting up every few seconds. Around 7 that evening, I flipped it over to check the damage. 35 missed calls in the 3 hours since I'd left. The panic was real. Kyle asked if I was holding up okay. I told him I felt sharper and clearer than I had in months. He said that was because I was finally taking the wheel back. My phone buzzed again, Ada's mother this time. Declined. Kyle offered me his guest room for however long I needed it. I thanked him. Ada was going to have a very rough morning. I smiled for the first time all day. She'd made this bed. Let her sleep in it. I switched my phone completely off and spent the rest of the evening helping Kyle prep his turkey for his own Thanksgiving dinner. Around 11 that night, I turned it back on just to see how bad it was. 83 missed calls, 97 text messages, 6 voicemails. I turned it off again without reading a single one. Tomorrow I'd sit down with Janet. Tomorrow I'd kick off the legal process. Tomorrow would be the official beginning of the end of this marriage. Janet met Kyle and me at her office downtown that Friday morning. Sharp woman, late 30s. Kyle had already given her the broad strokes before we walked in. She had me confirm the key details. Wife invited the ex to Thanksgiving, publicly humiliated me in my own home, stepdaughter told me to leave. I said yeah, that pretty much covered it. She asked if I'd already moved on the finances. I told her every account and every service was handled. She smiled and said that made her job significantly easier. We spent the next hour getting into the details. I'd owned the house outright, bought it before Ada was in the picture. The deed had only my name on it. Paid off the mortgage just last year. Both cars were in my name, titles and registrations. I was the only one who'd ever earned income for this household. Ada had walked away from her job of her own free will 6 months into the marriage. Janet explained there might be some community property arguments since we were legally married, but given that the house predated the marriage and I'd been the sole earner throughout, we had a solid position. I asked about Ruby. Janet asked whether I'd ever legally adopted her. I said no. Ada had always had a reason to push it off, always eventually. Janet said that meant I had zero legal obligation to Ruby. None whatsoever. Kyle brought up the fact that her biological father had waltzed back into the picture just yesterday after a 7-year absence. Janet said it sounded like he was the one who should be stepping up for his kid. She laid out the plan. She'd draft a cease and desist letter to Mike putting him on notice that I was done supporting his child and he needed to take responsibility. She'd also draft divorce papers seeking a clean break. I keep everything in my name. Ada walks away with nothing. No spousal support, since the marriage was under 5 years and she'd quit voluntarily. I asked how quickly this could all move. She said 3 months if Ada didn't fight it, 6 to 8 if she did, but based on everything I'd described, Ada didn't have the resources to put up much of a fight. I spent Friday morning signing paperwork and writing checks. $5,000 retainer for Janet. Worth every penny. Monday morning, I called Ruby's private school. The admissions director sounded genuinely confused when I explained I was calling to let them know I would not be covering any future tuition. Spring semester started in January, and I wanted them to have advance notice that Ruby's biological father, Mike Callahan, would need to be contacted about enrollment going forward. She pointed out that I was listed as the parent on file. I clarified that I was the stepfather, had never legally adopted Ruby, and was currently in the process of divorcing her mother. If Mike wanted his daughter continuing at their school, he could open his own checkbook. After I hung up, a text came in from Caroline, different in tone from all the panicked messages Ada had been firing off. She said she needed to talk and asked me to call her. When I called back, she sounded almost relieved to hear from me. Thank God. I've been trying to reach you since Thursday. What's going on, Caroline? I'm not calling to defend what Ada did. What she pulled was completely wrong. I told her not to invite Mike. So why are you calling? Because you need to know the full picture. Ada planned this for weeks. She thought making you jealous would make you fight harder for her. She'd been texting Mike for a month leading up to it. Mom encouraged the whole thing. Told her you'd gotten too comfortable and needed to be reminded of your place. I actually laughed out loud. My place? I know exactly how that sounds. I heard them planning it. I tried everything to talk her out of it. What about Ruby? She's been crying since Friday. She said she never thought you'd actually go. She told me to tell her it's fine. She's 16, she was saying what Ada coached her to say. Ada told her you'd be back on your knees by Friday night. I thanked Caroline and forwarded the entire conversation to Janet. She replied within minutes, called it gold and told me to keep documenting everything. The rest of that week was quiet. I stayed at Kyle's, went to work, kept all contact with Ada completely dark. Janet was handling the paperwork. The court order for exclusive possession of the house would be served within a few weeks. Everything was tracking exactly where it needed to be. Tuesday afternoon, Ada showed up at my workplace. Security rang my office to let me know there was a woman in the lobby demanding to see me. I called Kyle and told him I needed backup. He was there in 5 minutes. We went down together so I'd have a witness for whatever was about to happen. She looked wrecked, exhausted, mascara smudged, hair shoved back in a messy tie. She was perched on one of the lobby chairs, clutching her purse with both hands. She stood the moment she spotted me. Finally. Why haven't you answered any of my calls? Because I don't want to talk to you. We need to sit down and work through this. You can't just abandon your family. Kyle stepped up beside me. I gestured toward the seating area. Family? The family that moved me aside for Mike at my own table? Please just come home. We can fix this. Her voice went soft and pleading. Sign the divorce papers, Ada. The softness vanished in an instant, replaced by cold, hard anger. She started listing everything I'd shut down. Demanded to know how she was supposed to get by. I suggested she find a job, the way she had before she met me. Security was heading our way now, clearly my manager had put in a call when he saw things escalating. Ada spotted them approaching and her voice shot up, suddenly theatrical. You're leaving a 16-year-old girl to fend for herself. What kind of man does that? The kind who was told to get out of his own house. I looked at the guard. Please walk her out. They had to physically escort her to the parking lot. She was screaming the entire way, abandonment, cruelty, the whole performance. Half the office had crowded around the windows to watch. My manager was upstairs waiting when Kyle and I got back. He asked if everything was all right. I told him it was personal and it wouldn't be an issue again. After he walked away, Kyle said she was unraveling fast. I said, good. Maybe she'll sign the papers without making this ugly. Wednesday morning, Janet called with news. Ada had hired a lawyer, a guy named Dennis who'd already sent over a demand letter asking for spousal support, half the home's value, and retroactive child support for Ruby. I asked how much of it he could actually get. Janet said not a chance on any of it. The house was mine before the marriage. Ada quit voluntarily. Ruby was never legally my child. Dennis was the kind of attorney who takes losing cases because he gets his retainer up front. He'd drag it out for a few months, bill Ada for every single hour, then drop her the moment she couldn't pay anymore. I asked how she was paying him right now. Janet figured she'd probably scraped it together from family, but it wouldn't hold. That afternoon, Caroline called again with a warning. Ada was going around telling people I'd been abusive, that I'd controlled all the money and deliberately cut her off from friends and family. Caroline said she'd been shutting it down at every turn. Most of the family wasn't buying it anyway because they'd all watched how Ada treated me with their own eyes. I called Janet right away to bring her up to speed. She wasn't worried. She said to let Ada talk, because every lie she told was going to make her look worse in the end. But she wanted me in a body camera from that point forward. Any interaction with Ada needed to be on record. I asked if that was legal where we were. Janet confirmed we were in a single-party consent state. I was completely covered. Kyle had a body cam from some hiking trips he'd done. He brought it to work the next morning and showed me how it worked. Clip it to your collar, hit record. That's it. He said I might feel like I was on a police procedural, but really I was just protecting myself. Ada was escalating and this was the smart play. He was right. Thursday afternoon, Ada turned up at Kyle's apartment complex. She must have tailed me from work, because she was waiting in the parking lot when I pulled in. I turned the body camera on before I even got out of the truck. We need to talk. Talk to my lawyer. I'm still your wife. We should be able to have a conversation like two adults. Adults don't pull what you pulled on Thanksgiving. Get out of my way. She stood there blocking the path, looking absolutely desperate. I'm sorry. I don't know what else I can say. I made a terrible mistake. Please just come home. Sign the divorce papers. I can't afford this. Dennis is asking for $15,000 to represent me. That's your problem to solve. How am I supposed to come up with $15,000? Her voice was climbing. Maybe call Mike. He looked real at home in my house. Something snapped behind her eyes. Whatever mask she'd been wearing slipped completely. You're enjoying this. You're getting off on watching me drown. I'm enjoying not being disrespected under my own roof. She made one final push. The tears appeared almost on cue. She brought up Ruby again, said she was failing her classes and going into a depression spiral, that she needed structure and security. I reminded her that Ruby had seemed real unconcerned about stability when she was screaming at me on Thanksgiving. Didn't stop her. I told Ada that at 16, Ruby was old enough to start understanding that actions have consequences. Not my daughter, not my burden. I walked around her and into Kyle's building. She didn't follow. Kyle was already waiting inside. You get all of it? Every word. Send it straight to Janet. I did. Her response landed in under an hour. She said it was exactly what she needed. The temporary orders were served on a Friday morning, about 3 weeks after I'd filed. Janet had requested emergency relief as part of the divorce proceedings, specifically, exclusive occupancy of the marital home. Since the house had been mine before the marriage and my name was the only one on the deed, the judge granted it. Ada had 30 days to vacate. Standard notice period for divorce proceedings. My phone blew up. Ada demanding to know where she and Ruby were supposed to go. Her mother calling me a monster. Ruby saying she hated me and hoped I was happy about what I'd done to their lives. And then, of all people, Mike, sending a message telling me this was between me and Ada and to leave his daughter out of it. I only responded to Mike. Told him his daughter was his responsibility now. She had a father, time to step up. He didn't write back. Saturday morning, Caroline called with an update. Ada had completely broken down when the court order was delivered. She'd spent the time since then calling everyone in the family begging for money. Nobody was giving her anything, they'd all seen what she'd done. Her mother was the only one still defending her, but she didn't have the means to actually help. Caroline mentioned that Dennis had withdrawn from the case, sent Ada a letter citing unpaid fees and a difference in legal strategy. He'd worked for her for 2 weeks, sent one demand letter, taken whatever money she'd scraped together, and walked the moment she couldn't pay more. I asked about the court order. Caroline confirmed it was standing. 15 days left. If Ada wasn't out by then, the sheriff's department would come and enforce it themselves. She told me about Ruby, said she wasn't doing well. Skipping school, got suspended for mouthing off at a teacher. Ada had no control over her at all. Mike had blocked Ada's number and wanted absolutely nothing to do with any of this. Monday morning brought a new development. A woman from State Social Services named Bella called. She explained she'd received a report of child abandonment involving Ruby Callahan and needed to ask me some questions. I clarified right away that I was not Ruby's stepfather in any legal sense. Her mother and I were divorcing. Her biological father, Mike Callahan, was the parent of record. Bella asked whether I carried any financial responsibility for Ruby. I explained there had been no adoption, ever. She said they'd be following up with both parents and thanked me for clearing that up. Wednesday brought the attempted police report. 2 officers knocked on Kyle's apartment door that evening. I answered with the body camera already running and my phone recording audio as a backup. They told me they were there to ask questions about a domestic dispute. I told them there was no dispute because I didn't live with anyone. They said my wife had filed a report claiming I'd made threats toward her and my stepdaughter. I took out my phone and pulled up the cloud folder Janet had set up for exactly this, and told them I had video documentation of every single interaction with my ex-wife. Would they like to review it? The 2 officers looked at each other. One asked if there had been any physical confrontation. I told them no, I hadn't laid eyes on her since she'd shown up at my office the previous week, and I'd made a point of keeping my distance ever since. They asked a few more follow-up questions, wrote their notes, and left. I called Janet the moment they were gone. She asked if they'd given the report any weight. No, they could see right through it. Perfect. I'm adding it to the filing. Caroline called again that night with another update. She'd essentially become my inside source at this point, feeding me real-time information about what was unfolding at the house. Ada was trying to move my belongings, posted my tools on Craigslist, tried to sell my golf clubs. She was desperate for cash. I told Caroline to make sure Ada understood that every item in that house was documented. If anything turned up missing, it was theft, full stop. Caroline said Ada had stopped listening to her completely. She'd decided Caroline was a traitor for staying in contact with me. I asked Caroline if she was all right with that. She said she was more than fine with it, standing up for what was right mattered more. What Ada had done was wrong, and she was getting what she'd earned. Then Caroline mentioned one more thing. Ruby had been writing me letters. Ada kept finding them and tearing them apart. Caroline had managed to intercept one that Ruby had tried to hand off to her, and she sent me a photo. Handwritten on notebook paper. Ruby apologizing, saying she knew she'd blown it. She said she'd thrown away the best father she'd ever had. She didn't ask for forgiveness, just wanted me to know she understood now. I stared at that letter for a long time. Then I dropped it in the trash. The court-ordered move-out date fell on a Tuesday. I took the day off work and met Caroline at the house to be present through the whole thing. Janet had insisted I have a witness who could speak to the condition of the property if it ever came to that. Ada was sitting on the front steps when we pulled up. She looked completely defeated. "You're actually going through with this?" 30 days, exactly like the notice said. "Where am I supposed to go after this?" "Not my problem." Caroline stayed close as we went inside. Ada had packed most of their things into boxes stacked in the living room. The place was cleaner than I honestly expected. She followed us quietly from room to room. "I need more time. Please. Every apartment I've called wants first and last month's rent up front. You had 30 days. That's a reasonable amount of notice. I have Ruby to look after." "Where even is Ruby?" "School. I didn't want her here for this." Caroline and I walked through every room. No damage anywhere, nothing missing. I photographed everything. Ada watched without a word, all the fight finally out of her. At the end of the walkthrough, she made one last attempt. 3 years of marriage. That has to mean something to you. It meant everything until you threw it away. That's not fair. Fair was me showing up for 3 straight years without fail. Fair was me raising your daughter as my own. Fair was me covering every single expense while you sat home comfortable. You want to talk about fair? This is it." She was crying now. "I made one mistake. Doesn't that deserve a chance to be fixed? You didn't make a mistake. You executed a plan. You made a deliberate decision to humiliate me in front of your whole family. That's not an accident, that's a choice. Own it." The moving truck arrived at noon. 2 guys Ada had hired to load everything into whatever temporary place she'd managed to find. Caroline and I watched while they worked. Ada sat on the front steps the whole time, staring out at nothing. When the truck was loaded and ready, she stood up and handed me the house keys. Said she'd signed the divorce papers and left them on the kitchen counter. I went in and found them. She'd signed everything, no modifications, no objections. It was over. Janet had the paperwork filed before close of business that day. The judge approved the uncontested divorce 8 weeks later. 3 years of marriage. Done. The house sold in 2 weeks. I put the proceeds toward a down payment on a smaller place closer to work. New start, new neighborhood, no baggage attached. Kyle helped me move in. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Caroline called with one last update. Ada and Ruby were living with Ada's mother, and both of them were working now. Mike had reached out once and offered $100 a month. That was the full extent of his contribution. Caroline said Ada was still bitter, still pointing the finger at me for everything, but she was paying her own way. Ruby was in public school. Grades had slid. She was acting out, But she was starting to understand how the real world worked. Caroline asked if I had any regrets. None, I told her. Not a single one. They set out to show me my place. What they actually showed me was my worth. Best thing I ever learned.